Hi, welcome to Lady Rosa Legal Briefs. I've been a little bit busy today talking to a few people about some of the issues that they face, and one of the things that they have a problem with is the limitation period. So they've got a matter and they've left it too long to actually do anything about it. So in the context of banking law, one of the things that I've noticed, especially since the Royal Commission into banks, so some people didn't realise just how badly the banks behaved, and they didn't have all of the information at the time when the bank took them to summary judgment back in the day. So there's a lot of people who lost everything, were sent bankrupt, and when you're bankrupt you don't have the right to sue. That is like if there's a chosen action, which means you've got something that you can sue for, that right rests with the bankruptcy trustee. So you literally can't do anything because of that. And I guess time runs out from that perspective. If the trustee in bankruptcy doesn't want to do any lawsuits for you, I'm not sure that that's the right terminology. I'm not a bankruptcy lawyer, don't deal with it. And a lot of the legal terms I don't tend to use in these videos, simply because this isn't aimed at lawyers or law students or, anyone within the legal profession. These are squarely aimed at people who find themselves having to deal with the law and they've got no idea what it's about. And there's a lot of trust issues when you're dealing with a lawyer. You just don't understand what they're talking about because there's a lot of legal terminology that flies around, and we kind of get caught up in whatever our profession. We get caught up with the professional speak, whatever that may be. So with these videos, I don't want to be a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. I'm not acting as a lawyer. I'm not speaking as a lawyer. I'm simply trying to explain some of the concepts in plain English, which I think that's a really good move to start moving lawyers towards that, so that there's not endless Latin phrases and highfalutin words. It's I try to keep things simple, because if I can explain things in ordinary words, then when a lawyer starts talking to you and you're sort of starting to get lost, you'll probably remember the concepts. And that's something that you've got to know with the law is, how does the law work? And the reason there are limitation periods on things, and it's 3 years for some matters, so you've got to be really quick to get your case started. That's because you need certainty. You can't be hanging around for the next 20 years worrying if someone's going to sue you because they think you've done something wrong. So, I mean, if you haven't done anything wrong, it still really sucks to have to go to court and prove that you didn't do anything wrong. So it's sometimes we get this victim mentality going where we think everything's egregious and everything is this big deal and everybody hates us, and it's really helpful to not do that. Sometimes it's just that there isn't a case. It sucks. What's happened to you is bad, but you really don't have a legal leg to stand on. And other times, and one of the things about the limitation period is you can overcome it if you can prove fraud. If the other side has done something so that there was no way that you could have figured out that you are the victim of fraud, you can, if the other side's done something to hide all of this, you can't be bound by a limitation period because they're playing silly buggers. So there is some flexibility, but it's not much. And all of the law is kind of based on, you bring all of your evidence the first time. If you've got evidence and you haven't presented it, well, you can't bring it next time for the same matter. You can't start again and say, oh, well, now I've got this piece of paper. And they say, well, have you had it before? Well, yeah, I have. Well, no, you can't use it. So that's the Anshan estoppel. I'll probably do a video on the Anshan estoppel and cases where it's come up, because it's still a doctrine of the law. So a doctrine is just like the rules that they've come up with over time and they're usually named after the case that's sort of where the main discussion happened, and then it was like a higher court. So then it becomes one of the rules. It's just easier to have some of these rules. I'll probably go through some of the doctrines and that, just so that you become aware of if you're having to self-represent, or if your lawyer says, well, you can't do this because, and then they just sort of say the doctrine without explaining what it means, then you'll sort of know what it's about. I'll probably do a video on how to find all of these things, because usually Google is your friend, or if you use DuckDuckGo or any of them, you can find it. It's quite easy to find some of the legal doctrines. So with the limitation periods, it matters because if you've run out of time, chances are the court will not allow you to file your case. It's simple as that. You won't get it off the ground. And yeah, so let's move on to this. And here's my disclaimer. So nothing in this video constitutes legal advice, and it doesn't create a legal relationship. So, if you're listening and you think, oh, I do have this thing, and, I think I'll use this as legal advice. No, it's not. You need real legal advice, and you need to contact a lawyer. And the reason you need to contact a lawyer, and I've just realised I haven't turned this on. How about I go back to it all? I am very professional with this. I'm going to go through this very quickly. I'm just clicking through all the... Ooh. Right. Now let me find it again. Let me start it again. And let me actually click off my beautiful face. Okay. I'm allowed to be silly. So, clicking through endlessly. So I'm just going to... There we go. You've lost me. Which is probably a good thing, but there you go. So, this is the slide I came up with, isn't it? Bright and colourful. So, it's obviously we're talking about the limitation period, because I've already gone through this, because, silly me, wasn't paying attention. And here's my disclaimer. See, isn't it cute? But yeah, I'm not giving you legal advice. I can't give you legal advice because you can't. So if you watch videos like this and there's a lot of American lawyers that I have seen. I haven't found many Australian lawyers just talking about how the law works for people who may or may not need a lawyer. Most of the stuff that I see is like, doing more legal lecture type things, so it's all proper and everything. But, I have to do the whole disclaimer that I don't actually do legal advice. It's and the reason I can't give legal advice, there's two. And I mean, it depends on which side of the fence you're on as to which one would be the biggest one. And I would suggest that someone from the Law Society and the Legal Practice Board in Western Australia would think that the number one reason why I cannot give legal advice is because I'm a restricted practitioner. I'm currently not working, so I don't have supervision, and so I'm not allowed to give legal advice. But to me, that's a secondary reason. It's very, very important. But the main reason why I think, it doesn't matter if I'm restricted or unrestricted. The main reason I believe I can't give you legal advice is because every single case is different. And the facts of your case matter. As I said in yesterday's video, with the facts you can do so much, and it changes the outcome. If the factual matrix shows that, the other side committed fraud, then you're obviously going to have a different outcome if exactly the same facts are there, but the other side didn't do anything fraudulent. And then if just one thing on your side changes, it might make a different argument. So, if it's a difference between you approaching the bank manager and saying X, Y, Z, and then, that's different to you sort of say, how would I go about getting a loan? And the bank manager says, well, you do X, Y, Z. And depending on who does what and what's said, and, that there might be a different connotation to it. It might be, rather than giving you some financial advice or just, accepting your loan application and putting it through and, it gets approved, it might mean that there might be something a bit odd going on in the background. And, they might be setting you up somehow. Or, it's really hard to explain how just the different words might make a difference. It's like if in Amadio, the Commercial Bank of Australia versus Amadio, it's still good law for unconscionable conduct, and the unconscionable conduct was mostly by the son, who didn't work for the bank. So how did the bank get in trouble? Well, they should have known. They should have known that there might be something going on here, that, because the parents couldn't speak English, or didn't have a really good grasp of English, so the son was translating everything for them. And the bank had no way of knowing what he was translating and whether he was telling them the correct things. But if some of those circumstances are a bit different, it changes. So that's the reason why you want to go and see a lawyer for legal advice. And you don't ever, I don't care how great the lawyer is on the YouTube, it's not legal advice. It may not be relevant to your matter. There are so many different aspects that where you can get yourself in trouble if you're self-representing and you're just taking, if you're cherry picking the things rather than taking a big picture look at it, then you can stuff up a really good case. And I mean, as I say, I'm kind of tweaking these videos to go to people who are involved in a matter where they've got a lawyer and they just need some basic knowledge to feel confident that their lawyer is doing the right thing. Most lawyers do the right thing, or at least they try to do the right thing. The law it's not an exacting science. Everything's a 50-50 proposition. You're basically doing a debate with the court and trying to convince the court that your version of events is the proper interpretation, your interpretation of the law in relation to what's happened is more correct, and that the case law that you've come up with really highlights that you're right and the other side did the wrong thing. That's sort of it in a nutshell. Lawyers will argue with me. This isn't a legal argument about it. That's just basically what it is. So you need to get legal advice, and you know, if you're self-representing, I would still recommend getting legal advice and or a barrister's advice, simply because that'll save you a lot of time and effort. And whatever you do, do not go the constitutional arguments, because they're a waste of time and effort, because the courts will not indulge it. They simply shut it down. I've seen videos where people claim that, oh, you know, so-and-so's really upset the judge and had a win in court. No, you didn't have a win. The judge walked out. That's not a win, dear. That is, you've wasted the court's time. You've resolved nothing. You're just getting on the path to being declared a vexatious litigant, and you won't be allowed to have any matter heard in court ever again, because they really can't be asked listening to you. That's just my interpretation of it. I could be wrong. So, you know, so back to the limitation period. Now, it does matter, because as I say, they do want for matters to close. You can't keep going back and back and back. Now, one of the things that I always say is, when you go to court, what you get is the law. You don't always get justice. We'd like to think we get justice, but you just get the law. Now, do I think that the first decision should stand? No. No. If you're pretty sure that you've been done over, then by all means, you know, get it re-adjudicated. You know, do the appeal. Get someone to look at it. If after summary judgment and you lose your appeal, and you've lost all avenues of appeal, but you've had a loss, and you can sheet that loss home to the other party, you know, maybe you can sue them for damages. If you can prove that they caused your loss. I mean, that's what we did. We sued them, the bank, for damages. But the court does like to have limitation periods, so you can't wait around for things too long, because the other party has to know that, you know, this does come to an end. So, in Western Australia, we've got the Limitation Act 2005, and Part 3, Division 3, is the extension by courts. Now, I've cut it off at 2, even though the section is a bit longer. And the reason I've done that is because the rest of it deals with a bit more specific parts, whereas 1 and 2 are the ones that I have researched for someone today. Now, in a court in Western Australia, the Limitation Act of Western Australia applies, but, and this is where it starts to get complicated, when you're dealing with something like a bank, where there is Commonwealth legislation that covers bank conduct, this might not apply. It might not be the Limitation Act that's relevant, so the court might not extend the period under the West Australian legislation. So, you know, I like that you can extend the time, but it's got to be West Australian legislation based to get the West Australian Limitations Act across. Now, what I thought I'd do, because it does get a bit complex, so I thought I would do a quick research for the purposes of this video. And now I was going to look at a lot more cases, but the most interesting one, and I know the people involved, I've known them since they sort of started their stuff. Yeah, it was 2013 I met them, I believe. So it's Shannon Permanent Custodians Limited. Now, the Shannons were taken to court by Permanent. They were self-representing for a long time. They ended up getting federal funding to engage a law firm to do the trial, and they lost the trial. Now, I have read the judgment. I must confess I am not impressed with the judgment. I felt that the judge seemed to really try to make the facts fit his ideas of, you know, whatever. I was at the court for the trial. I think I only went for one day because that's all the time that I had. But because I was working at the time. So I did go to the trial. I heard some of it, and I thought some of what was going on was really weird. And then when the judgment came down, I sort of thought that's not very good. Anyway, they appealed it, and they self-represented during the appeal, and they did a really good job of it. So, you know, this section here that I've grabbed from the judgment, it's just that, you know, under Section 76 of the National Credit Code. So, because the Limitations Act wasn't the correct act to follow, you know, it was just time had run out under the Limitation Act. So, you know, he decided, you know, it just wasn't going to fly. But the Shannons did win their appeal, and they're now, I think they've had their first conference to settle the matter out of court before it gets retried. So anyway, now they had lots of grounds of appeal because, you know, and ground 14 goes towards ground 15. So, you know, the misconduct complained of was not discoverable within the limitations period because the company withheld it. And, you know, to me that was a really big thing. So they're not allowed, the other side is supposed to be, if it's a bank, they're supposed to be an ideal litigant. They're supposed to assist the court above and beyond. They're not just any old litigant that, you know, does whatever they like. And, oh, can I go back to it? Oh, yes. See, I can do this, sort of, sometimes. So they got all of their grounds of appeal. Now, the reason why I grabbed this as a slide, because it doesn't really show the court's reasoning. It just sets out what the grounds were. But because it says, you know, the misconduct was not discoverable, so why would it be, you know, out of time when you literally couldn't discover it? And I mean, I found our information in time and we started trying to find a lawyer straight away, so we were within the time period. But a lot of people don't. You kind of, the damage that ordinary people get from this kind of conduct from a bank. It's, you know, I've seen hard-nosed businessmen fall apart with all of the dirty things that happen to them. And, you know, if multimillionaires can become victims of a bank, then, you know, ordinary mum and dad businesses definitely fall over, and just borrowers with a home loan. It's pretty sad. And you know, the whole public interest, it's a provision of the National Credit Code, and you know, they said that he didn't apply it properly. As I say, the Shannons got their appeal up. There's a fair bit of discussion. It's a really long judgment. I mean, it was a 3-day trial, and or a 3-day appeal hearing. So it was really, reading the judgment of the appeal, it's very complex. But if you get a chance, read it, because it's really, so see, you can go back to it. You can find this. Yes, it's Shannon and Permanent Custodians Limited, 23 November 2020, WASCA 198. So, but it's one of the things that you do need to know with your matter, because if you're coming in from, say, you come across information now and you couldn't have known about it, and you've been trying to get this thing up, and you're only just out of time, or, you know, time's run out because the other side keeps stalling, then you still need to look at the legislation. Now, I have a real problem with a lot of the people that approach me, because they've been self-representing for so long that their matter actually is pre-2010. And the government was fiddling about with all the legislation again at that stage. So there's a change in the legislation that applied, and then it starts to get really messy, because, you know, you've got to go with what the law was at the time, not what the ideal law would have been. So how do you find the relevant legislation? And, you know, you need to find out what was its purpose, you know. Now, you would think that all of the different legislation about consumer lending would exist to protect consumers. And I hate to burst your bubble, but it's not about protecting the consumer. It's about protecting the banks. Everything in Australia is about protecting the banks. Call me a cynic, but that's what it is. And what little protection the government brought in, they're now undoing. And it's horrific to know that, you know, the banking lobby is so powerful that the Australian government just caves and, you know, throws all of the Australian consumers under the bus. And, you know, all of the small businesses, all bank customers. If you've come across this video and you think, oh, I'll listen to this crazy woman dribble shit, then that's fine. And when I used to blog all the time, I would have people accuse me of being too stupid for words, and I have to agree with that. You know, I fell for all of this stuff, except now I know that super intelligent people have also been done over by the banks. So it wasn't just little old me. And I know people who hold shares in banks, and they think that if you make the banks act according to the law and, you know, with a shred of decency, then their profits will fall. And I'm sorry, but if the banks can't make a profit without ripping off their own customers, then maybe they shouldn't be banks. They make billions of dollars of profits every quarter. And, you know, they can't afford to be honest. I mean, what the? No, I have arguments with people who think that the banks are well regulated. No, they're not. They've never been. ASIC was hauled over the coals so many times for failing to act, and they've started taking the banks to task now. But, you know, ASIC doesn't help anyone. AFCA doesn't help anyone. People are on their own, and the banks hold all the cards. And you would think that the banks would be fair and honest, and no, they're not. Totally cynical on that one. Don't care what you say if you think that all banks are great, because talk to people who've been done over by them and see how much they believe you. Oh, look. So anyway, you need to know what the legislation was at the time of the loan. We're in 2021, so realistically, we shouldn't have that many cases going through the courts. But I mean, the Shannons got their loan in 2006. Their loan was around about the same time as ours. They've been fighting for a long time. There are still people fighting for a long, long time, trying to get justice. And it's just a never-ending battle for them, because it's just such a convoluted process, and a lot of people self-represent, and it's difficult enough for some lawyers to deal with this. Some experienced lawyers will not touch it with a barge pole, simply because it is so time intensive. It really saps you. Anyway, that's the end of the slides. I'm back, and I've got El Puppy at the door wanting my attention, because, you know, he thinks I'm overdoing it. So I was just going to do a really quick live today just on the whole limitation period. Now, I was going to show you, can I do it? Can I get it happening? No, I haven't got the right document up. So we've now got the National Credit Code, and that's been in operation since the 1st of July 2010. We've also got the updated Australian Consumer Law, which a lot of people think that that covers mortgages. It doesn't. Mortgages, you're better off invoking the ASIC Act. But as I say, anything involving Commonwealth legislation, you can go to the limitation periods within those acts and how to extend them. So I did run out of time a bit to look at that. So yeah, the responsible lending laws they're going to get over. So the best way to really think about it is to read a few articles, and there's a lot of law firms, you know, publish articles on different topics. So if you Google the limitation period, they're written in plain English, easy to understand. What I'm trying to achieve here is to just point out that it exists. It's an issue. If you are getting close to running out of time, or you've run out of time, you need to really be prepared with any submissions you make to the court, outlining why the limitation period should be extended. You know, if it's an application just for that. And if you're getting close to the period, the limitation period, you know, calling your matter, time on your matter, you could make an application to the court for an extension of time so that you can get the last of your ducks in a row before you do it. It's worth considering. Why not? I'm a little bit hesitant to go the litigation route, but you've got to be prepared for it. You know, I'm a firm believer in settle things out of court, but to settle things out of court, especially if you're a self-represented litigant, you've got to have all your ducks in a row. You've got to know all of the issues, all of the things that can trip you up. So you've got to be prepared. And, you know, the limitation period is just one thing that you have to be aware of. You can, in the West Australian legislation, all of it actually, they tell you what the limitation is. So there'll be, you know, it'll say it's 3 years for these kinds of matters and it's 6 years for something else. And there's, I'm not sure about the criminal fraud. I've been led to believe that if there's been fraud, criminal fraud, then there is no limitation period. You can be done for that any time. I haven't really checked up on that properly. It's not something that I've really been chasing at this stage. I've been otherwise engaged. So am I going to look at it? Yeah, not as part of the limitation period, but as part of fraud. So there's civil fraud and there's criminal fraud. I want to read, and I'll probably do a few live sessions on it. There were some reports done on criminal liability for corporations. So it's corporate criminal liability, I think. I've got it ready to go. I just haven't found the time to really get into it. So let's see if I've got it in here. I have got too many files. I really do. Okay. No, I haven't actually got that one up. No, that's the family law one. So family law really annoys me. No. So I've got ASIC reports and things. So just as discussion points for future things. So I still haven't read all of the Royal Commission report because it's really, really long document, and it's like, oh. And of course the relevant section for me is not that big because, much to my disgust and disdain, they rolled everything into it, which isn't what it should have been. It should have been a couple of years spent just looking into what banks do to their customers and, you know, actually setting up a compensation scheme so that even people who have, you know, been bought off and, you know, given a minute amount, that they get a bit more compensation to make up for the damage that the banks have caused. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that because, as I say, I haven't really been well prepared for today. I do apologise for that, but I figure with, yeah, no viewers, it's like, I know I'm talking to myself. I do. I will start hooking into a bit of a network and seeing if I can get people to actually watch this, and maybe give me some ideas of, you know, what people want. But at the moment it's still building things. So this is, you know, the point in time where we would be having a discussion if there were any live viewers. I will set it up properly so that I've got the chat happening properly, and, you know, I might even work on getting it looking nice eventually. Anyway, that's me done for today. I will be back at 5:30 Western Australia time tomorrow afternoon, and hope you have a great night. And when you do see this, you know, you can disagree with me, not a problem. As I say, this isn't me being a lawyer and giving legal advice or anything, so this is not how I would be in an office with people, but, you know, with clients. But this is just, you know, explaining the law for some people who might be interested, or, you know, if yeah, I might have a look at some of the constitutionalists and their shenanigans, but not today. It's fine. We're done. Anyway, have a great day.